Why would a brother of same ethnicity as I treat me in a sense as if he was white in office? Well, we need to ask ourselves that question. So what I want to do is basically what we call it is clearing, give some word clearing, so we'll be in tune to what these words mean when I give them to you or when I say them. So, and when I was basically told about this, the topic is, do I look suspicious? Okay, and so that's what we're going to talk about. And the other part of it is, what is racial profiling? What is really racial profiling? So I'm going to give you a couple of definitions here so you can be clear as I begin to get into what occurred in Florida, as well as here and around the country. But maybe before I start, let me just ask the question. How many have actually been part of a protest or rally? Let me see your hands. Okay, so about half the room. The other part of this is being informative to why it's important that you become part of a rally or protest and helping you find your voice in that movement for bringing the justice that we need in our community. So a couple of definitions about racial profiling first. The concept of racial profiling has been defined in many ways, including any police-initiated action that relies on race, ethnicity, or national origin rather than the behavior of an individual or information that leads the police to a particular individual who has been identified as being or having been engaged in a criminal activity. Okay, that's one part of it. Another part of it is racially biased policing occurs when law enforcement inappropriately consider race or ethnicity in deciding which and whom and how to intervene in an enforcement capacity. You know, and so if you need to look at the legal definition, and I'm going to paraphrase the legal definition of what racial profiling is. A police officer could basically stop you, but as long as he says it's not because of your color or race, and includes the fact that you just look suspicious, he could just say you look suspicious, or include the fact that it appeared he was coming from a crack dealing transaction. You know, I pulled him over because it appeared that he wasn't wearing his seatbelt. It wasn't because I was racially profiling. So we got to be clear that an officer, an enforcer of the law, cannot just choose to apprehend you or pull you over or hold you suspicious just based on your race. That's why they never can really stop this racial profiling, because it's so vague in the definition according to law. So you need to be clear on that. Another definition I'm going to give to before I move on is, in literature today, there appears to be at least two clearly distinguishable definitions of the term racial profiling: a narrow definition and a broad definition. Under the narrow definition, racial profiling occurs when a police officer stops, questions, arrests, and or searches somebody solely on the basis of the person's race or ethnicity. Under the broader definition, which is used, racial profiling occurs whenever a police routinely uses race as a factor that, along with the accumulation of other factors, causes an officer to react with suspicion and take action. You know, that's what I was talking about. They just can't stop me because I'm black. At least they won't say that. They'll say that I look suspicious because I came from a suspicious neighborhood, or I made a suspicious looking stop. Now, this is critical. Racial profiling really comes from this thing we call white supremacy. And I'm hoping we're all clear on what white supremacy is. So that I can be comfortable in helping ensure that you know, I'm going to give the definition of what white supremacy is. Because we need to know what we're dealing with, because racism isn't just blatant today. Racism isn't really just particularly from one person. We have institutions. Correct. Their culture. Correct. Is permeated with racism. Correct. And we need to know what those definitions are. White supremacy is the belief and the promotion of the belief that white people are superior to the people of other racial backgrounds. The term is sometimes used specifically to describe a political ideology and to advocate the social, political, and historical and/or industrial dominance by whites. White supremacy, as with racial supremacism, in general, is rooted in the ethnocentrism and the desire for hegemony and power, and has frequently resulted in violence against non-whites. The academic use of white supremacy, because this is a university, so I'm going to give you the academic use of it. The term white supremacy is used in academic studies of racial power to denote a system of structural racism which privileges white people over others, regardless of the presence or absence of racial hatred. By white supremacy, I do not mean to allude only to self-conscious racism of white supremacist hate groups. Okay, that's the difference. I refer instead to a political, economic, and cultural system in which white overwhelmingly control power and material resources. Conscious and unconscious ideas of white superiority and entitlement are widespread, and relations of white dominance and non-white subordination are daily reenacted across a broad array of institutions and social settings. Two effects. And I talked a little about the first one, and that's institutionalized racism, word clearing, right? Examples are racial profiling by security guards and police, use of stereotype racial distortions such as Indian mascots, the under and misrepresentation of certain racial groups in mass media, and racial bias barriers to gain employment and professional advancement. Additionally, differential access to goods, services, and opportunity of society can be included within the term of institutional racism, such as unpaid street roads, inherent socioeconomic disadvantages, institutionalized racism. We see that through a lot of the institutions that we have here in the United States. We need to ask the question, how did we get there? But the other part of this effect has to do with specifically, let's say, me, or people that look like me, or people of color. And this is the psychological warfare or the psychological revolution that we're in. So we need to be clear that we are in a revolution. Internalized racism is the acceptance by members of a racially stigmatized people of negative perception about my own abilities and intrinsic worth, characterized by low self-esteem and low esteem of others like me. This racism can be manifested through embracing whiteness, right? Example, stratification by skin color in non-white communities, self-revaluation, such as racial slurs, nicknames, rejection of ancestral culture, etc., and resignation, helplessness, and hopelessness, such as dropping out of school, fell in the boat, and even engaging in health risk activities. And one of the things that my wife and I do when I go, because thank God, been able to go to different universities now across the country to speak, is we share the solution to our problem. And when I say black, you can replace it with brown or other, non-white, is black love, black unity, black family, black life, which equals black power. And until we find that, we will always gravitate in a sense of this whiteness that allows us to charge my own brother for something he didn't do wrong, all because of his own color of his skin, and I look just like him, not knowing that I've been psychologically duped to believe that I'm better maybe because I am an officer. You know, so this system is powerful. And so I'm gonna move on.
Thank you for interrupting me.
Oh, thank you. Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. So as I was saying, we are in a psychological warfare. Psychological manipulation is a type of social influence that aims to change the perception or behavior of others through underhanded, deceptive, and even abusive tactics. By advancing the interests of the manipulator, white supremacy, often at the other's expense, such methods could be considered exploitative, abusive, devious, and deceptive. So I don't want to get hung up in giving you all these definitions, but what I want to do now is really go to some comparison of Oscar Grant and Trayvon, so we can see how heinous these acts that are happening in our society are happening, and also for us to better understand that the type of tactics that will work best to bring about a solution or change or even justice to us that are feeling the injustice. So I'm not sure if many of you really paid attention to what happened with Oscar and what happened to Trayvon Martin, but here you go in some snippets. Before Johannes Mesley was arrested, he had a history. He had a history of violence against young men of color. The reason why many of you may not know it is because the Policeman's Bill of Rights, which is legislation that has been passed in the state, prohibit us to give you that information. We weren't privy and entitled to it because we sat in that court and we heard the judge and the defense attorney argue not to allow it. But they could demonize us. They could tell you everything that I did. I sold dope, I smoked crack, I did this, I broke in this house, I did this, I did that, to justify why I should be incarcerated. But that same officer got a history of, let me give you some facts. Johannes Mesley has been arrested before. Johannes Mesley has slapped a Hispanic female in high school, and the family was sued for that. Johannes Mesley has beat up 3 other African American men before he got to Kenneth Carruthers. Kenneth Carruthers, another African American young man, was beaten up 45 days before Oscar. Before Oscar was murdered. So he had a history, and they knew he was troublesome, and they continued to allow this individual on the force. George Zimmerman, as you know, hundreds of phone calls about us, and even little black boys,
7-year-old,
walking in the neighborhood,
7 years old,
suspicious. I mean, in history, and people began to complain about it, but nobody seemed to address it. You know, of course, as you know, on that platform, Tony Peroni, the reason why he detained Oscar and them because he said they looked suspicious. As you know, with Trayvon, he looked suspicious, according to George Zimmerman. Oscar and his friends were wearing black t-shirts and hoodies. Trayvon was wearing a hoodie. Oscar happened to be on the phone talking to his girlfriend right before he was brutally murdered. Trayvon happened to be on the phone talking to his girlfriend right before he was brutally murdered. Trayvon, as you heard in the conversation by George Zimmerman, used racial epithets in regards to Trayvon. Tony Peroni, and if you don't know, and if you know, there's no children here, so I guess I can just be blatant, called Oscar a bitch-ass nigger 2 times before they threw him to the pavement and they murdered him. I mean, these are just facts. And this is not just these 2 cases, but a span of cases happening across the United States that we need to address. That's why you have to find your voice, and you have to hear this, and you have to be a part of a rally to understand just how significant and important it is, and especially you that are students, that are getting educated by the system, to keep yourself from getting caught up and doing exactly what we're complaining about. You have to become knowledgeable and understand how it works so that you can better navigate yourself through this system of injustice. So, as you know, Chief G of the Alameda County Police Department, or BART, Chief of Police, resigns. Chief Lee of the Stanford Police Department, as you know, steps to the side. District Attorney Head of Alameda County, Tom Orloff, who was the same district attorney who prosecuted Huey Newton takes an early retirement. District attorney head in Florida over the Seminole County area decides he wants to, Washington decides he wants to step to the side. You know, we need to ask ourselves, I mean, they knew what was happening, everything that they did was wrong, and they also understand history and timing. And if you notice also, the chief of police of Stanford all of a sudden was having a heart attack because what he's trying to do is save his money, save his position, go out on workman's comp, let all this blow over, and then step back in his position and continue to keep that same old sickness going on and on and on and on. So we have to be clear of the different moves that they make in order to understand how we need to make moves that are positive for us in receiving the justice that we need. But one of the most significant aspects of Oscar and Trayvon is what happened here in the grassroots movement of people coming together, many different pockets, all having different beliefs on how to get to this justice versus how the development occurred there. So the difference here is that we had no real so-called black political leaders step to the forefront of the movement. We did not have CNN working on our behalf. We did not hear Dr. Phil or Oprah Winfrey or any of these major news programs working for us. We had YouTube and we had your voice.
And Facebook.
And we had Facebook.
Don't forget Facebook.
Okay. But you get what I'm saying? In the Trayvon Martin's case, different. They called in all these political figures. I mean, you know, there's some good that I saw with the fact that we didn't have all that, but there are also some negative that I also see by not having that. There, to me, in this other aspect of these political figures coming, in many ways they co-opted the actual movement to justice. You know, and so if you ask me why I say that, because now the family, and in many ways the community is restricted on how they can move forward if George Zimmerman just get a slap on the wrist and go home. Because we know he's been arrested today. We are clear about that. He's been arrested.
No, physically?
He's been physically arrested. He's turned himself in.
Okay, that's
so
right.
he is incarcerated. Now, how long he's staying there becomes a different story. But chances are, he's going to utilize the self-defense and stand your ground laws to try to maneuver his way out of the situation. Now, we as a family, and those that may have been in the criminal justice system, and I'm being nice, racist criminal justice system, understands that your battle for true justice doesn't start until you enter them doors.
That's right.
So you know, and that brought me to this one point, and I'm gonna share this. There was a post today, right, on these judges. What was their name?
Pennsylvania.
The U.S. judge admits to jailing children for money. Did anybody read that today?
Yeah, it's out.
This has
Went up.
been around.
Right, okay. I mean, these judges got $2.6 million for jailing our children.
Yeah.
Sending them to jail.
Yeah.
You know, these are judicial figures sworn to uphold the laws of this land, and yet they are prime examples of how white supremacy works in the criminal justice system.
That's right.
I mean, we're talking about children being locked up for pettiness and childishness. Yes, Jerome.
I just wanted, just so you understand, it sounds fantastic, but it's not. The place that he was sending these children to was a newly privatized youth jail. So they paid him per head, literally, for every kid he sent. And he didn't just send black kids. He sent white kids too.
Yeah,
so
but,
he just
but
wanted
predominantly we got
the mean green.
And so we need to be clear that, because, you know, the United States has the biggest prison system in the world.
Correct.
And the state of California have more people in prison than all the other prisons basically around the world. Since 1976 to 2000, over 10,578 black and brown men have been killed by police officers. All the way up to Johannesburg, only 6 officers at that time were brought to trial. I'm going to share that book too. Only 6 officers were brought to trial. only one was found guilty, and that was actually the same two officers that killed Malice Green in Detroit. And they ended up getting off. And the reason why they got off, I got to share this, was because the jury, who happened to be about 8 or 9 blacks, African Americans, and some whites, happened to get to see a movie called Malcolm X while they were sequestered in deliberation. And because they saw that movie, the defense attorney was able to make the argument that that was biased to his defendant, and thereby that they need to be released. And so basically it got overturned and they were released. The Department of Justice came in to recharge him, and one of them claimed he was sick and dying, so they let him do his time at home. And the other one, they didn't have enough evidence to keep, so they let him go. Anyway, these officers, you know, got out. That's what I'm saying. Now, back here in the state of California, Johannes Beverly was the first officer in in California state history to be charged. The first officer in California state history to be found guilty. And that all came from a grassroots movement of youth coming together, speaking out outrage to the injustice that you witnessed. Because as far as the media and everybody else was concerned in the courtroom, what you saw didn't happen that way.
Sure didn't.
They wanted us to believe that it didn't happen the way we saw it. It actually happened this way. Oscar was the reason why he is dead. Yeah. He brought his own death on his own self. And it wasn't so much that Johannes Beverly, you know, killed him. Exactly. You know. So it's, I mean, you know, I love talking to students today. You know, and not that I desire to be on this mission, but sometimes God calls us to do some things that is totally opposite than what we were planning. My nephew was murdered. And I went through a racist criminal justice system that totally denied us our right to justice. And it's very painful to see, because I was a believer, that I thought in some ways we would get justice if we got in the system. We would get it.
Yeah, right.
But I'm absolutely clear today that the criminal justice system is that institutionalized racism that I'm talking about, because when you got a district attorney that's got to charge a police officer, like the one that's going to try to charge George Zimmerman, and George Zimmerman is not an actual police officer, by the way,
right.
But he's protected. You know, in that article on the back, I kind of took issue with the fact that it says Hispanic. George Zimmerman is white and Hispanic.
Say both of them.
And, you know, so we need to be clear.
That's right.
It's not about a brown man killing a black man.
That's right. That's what they want to make it.
George Zimmerman, who has taken on white supremacist way of thought and acting. Right? He's a part of the fraternal order of policemen, and he decided to be that vigilante because that neighborhood watch program does not exist in his neighborhood. And if it did, it's not registered with the organization in itself that is considered a neighborhood watch program. And everything he did was in violation of their actual guidelines to be a neighborhood watchman. And then of course, clear instructions, he was told to back off. You know, and so when we see this, you know, and your students, you're young, your students, you have to think, if we got it like this now, what will your children have it like this? This is not so much today about you. It's about your future. It's about their future. In order to bring a brighter future for them, you're going to have to pick up this banner. You're going to have to join this fight. And you have to be really committed, because it's only going to take all of us standing together to bring about that change. You know, I am Oscar Grant. You're Oscar Grant. You're Trayvon Martin. We're Sean Bell, Amadou Diallo, Malice Green, Emmett Till. If you could have saw us in action yesterday, Gerald happened to be there, myself. Whenever there is a wrongful killing, and you see it on Facebook or you happen to see a flyer, it's so important that you come and stand with us, because this whole battle is about bringing justice to us so that we can actually have some justice, equality, and freedom. Stockton has picked up the pace because there's been a lot of unnecessary killings in the valley. To give an example, Sacramento on Super Bowl night.
That's right.
We got an exact Trayvon Martin right here in California, just like in Florida. Why we don't know about this one? Because the media hides this stuff. That one bubbled up because of political figures getting involved. This young man, or he actually happened to be 47, went to the store, bought himself a soda and a bag of chips, and got murdered. Police detains him. He asked him why, he's older, so he's going to ask, why are you detaining me? I haven't done anything. And then after they realized they couldn't keep him, he started walking away. One of the white officers decided to tase him. Tase him, go into a struggle. I guess he tries to pull the taser out. And of course, now he resists an arrest. I mean, you in much pain, like Oscar. When Tony Peroni had his knee on Oscar's neck, and was pushing his head through the floor, his whole skull was fractured. But he was being choked. And he was saying, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. And if any of us is getting choked, what you gonna do?
You're not gonna be still.
You're gonna move. You're gonna try to get to a point where you can get some air. That wasn't resisting arrest. He was just trying to find a position where he wouldn't be so much in pain. I don't know how dramatic to get, but when I saw that video of Oscar being murdered, I fell to my knees. And just that thought of that pain is still devastating. It can happen to any of us. And the only way that we're going to get through this is that we got to understand how serious this is. We cannot continue to be immune on just another brother dead. He probably doing something wrong. It's not always true. It's not always true. And until we get past that and begin to have some empathy, we got to have empathy for our people that are dying in the streets, especially young black men. I see a whole bunch of women in here. Where's our black men? They in prison. They sit in the graves. It's just torture. And it's you mothers that hurts me to see a teary-eyed mother lose a son. And the lesson that you're being taught behind that is to help make your son docile. Because now you're scared. You got a baby, he's 7 years old, you just seen a 17-year-old get murdered. First thing you're going to tell him is that the police stop you, do everything he said, just be obedient, don't do nothing wrong. You know what I'm saying? Now he grows up docile, real passive. We're soldiers.
That's right.
Died for my mother, my wife, my sister. And the way I feel today, any mother that's crying that has lost a son, until we feel that pain, we won't have a chance in the change that we need. This is serious. We are in a revolution. In order to bring about that change, you're going to have to see it, you have to understand it, and you're going to have to come on board. Otherwise, we're just going to continue to die, be totally enslaved, and your children will have no freedom. Thank you.
It don't get no realer than that. It don't get no realer than that. That was very passionate. We very much appreciate you, Brother Cephus Johnson. We thank you so much for your words, your inspiration, your thoughts, your reflections. At this time, we're going to move into our